Good evening, this is Jeff J. Brown, China Rising Radio Sinoland in Shenzhen, just south of the Tropic of Cancer. Still have a terrible sore throat, and so actually all I'm drinking tonight is just piping hot water to hopefully keep myself from coughing during this podcast. All right. This is an email exchange between William Engdahl and Jeff J. Brown. There are so many links in here. It's not even funny, and so you really need to get to the source article, which I will include with SoundCloud and YouTube. Pictured above, Taiwanese Li Ming-che at his sentencing in September 2017 for subverting China's communist socialist way of life. He worked for years to get Chinese citizens to try to overthrow the government. Baba Beijing finally got a belly full of his Western NGO-backed treason, and as a result, he is now spending 5 years in prison. These are the kind of turncoats Baba is worried about. Not the untold thousands of social media groups in China where members are against the government, the Communist Party of China, the CPC, different leaders, and just about every other niche group you can think of with a gripe. All right. Here's the podcast. I always appreciate it when fans take the time to contact me about an article, podcast that I did. It is especially gratifying when a fellow author journalist does so because they know how much work goes into a well-researched piece. So when my author friend William Engdahl sent me an email to compliment me on my post about Western racism, I was all smiles. William is an outstanding writer who has written numerous books. I highly recommend that you subscribe to his free newsletter. He always sends something informative and thought-provoking. His website is www.williamengdahl.com. www.williamengdahl.com. The start is William's short email to me. I sat down to write a few lines, and 7 hours later, voila, I realized it ended up being a great article, so I emailed William to get his permission to turn it into a email exchange between the two of us. He kindly agreed. So enjoy. From William Engdahl, Friday, March 2nd, to Jeff J. Brown. Subject, West going rabid over China's participatory democracy. Jeff, thanks for this. From afar I am of two minds, so this helps. One is an ominous sign of tightening down debate. On the other hand, Silk Road BRI is a counter to the entire Anglo-American New World Order, which is so important to steer rough waters ahead, and the need for strong leadership, not muddy consensus. Only I see some ominous signs that are not so positive, such as the recent deal between Xi Jinping and the Pope in Rome. This could prove very dangerous for China, as is the Syngenta, quote, biotech venture into GMO. Any comments are most welcome. Best, William. And here is my response. Hi, William. Thank you for commenting, and I'm glad you liked the article. I hope you will sign up for my email alert so you can stay on top of my work. I always enjoy getting your emails, too. First, William, I congratulate you for saying, quote, from afar I'm of two minds, so this helps, end of quote. This shows someone who understands that where they are matters and conflicting ideas in news are healthy. To be honest with you, the tightening down debate has been largely conducted on known Western fifth columnists. Baba Beijing used its new NGO control law to go after several hundred unregistered foreign agents. Their social media accounts were sometimes temporarily, sometimes permanently shut down. They were brought in for questioning and the like. Many of them could have been arrested for aiding and abetting a foreign country. Some like Liu Xiaobo and Li Mingche were imprisoned because their treason was so chronically obvious. But overall, the CPC is amazingly patient and indulgent. I have an interesting anecdotal story to share with you, William. Over the Chinese New Year holiday, my family and I visited an old employee of mine from the 1990s. His father got caught up in the 1950s anti-right campaign and suffered terribly. Thus, my friend, down to his spleen, viscerally hates the CPC, Mao, and every communist in between up to Xi. He participates in anti-party, anti-Mao, anti-Xi social media forums. There are conservative forums who hate Deng and the presidents thereafter for selling out Mao to capitalist reforms. There are pro-Deng groups who idolize his modernization, and pro-Xi groups who love his anti-corruption drive. There are untold thousands of these social media groups of every niche and persuasion, with hundreds of millions of participants. It is vibrant and very active. Is there censorship? Of course. If someone starts spreading outright lies and scurrilous rumors, those threads will get cut. But want to call Xi an evil monster? Go right ahead. Do it on WeChat or Weibo and the scores of other social media venues Westerners have never heard of. Just don't do it on a street corner. That is a public loss of faith for Baba Beijing and very un-Confucian. Seeing all the imperial search engine suppression for hundreds of alternative websites, including the Granville Post and China Rising Radio Sinoland, and all the channels and accounts being shut down in Western social media, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, I think Western censorship is much more intense and ideologically motivated than in China. Case in point, my stumble upon count was frozen over a year ago. There are 300 to 500 public protests a day in China, but they have to be for a specific reason. A case of fraud, a corrupt land deal, a rotten party cadre, an injustice, a polluting factory, etc. You just can't go out on a public square and vaguely say that the CPC is crap, Xi is corrupt, or demand Western democracy. Again, this is a loss of faith in Chinese culture and doesn't better society. Baba Beijing loves all the development of China's social media, which is one of the reasons it promotes it so heavily. Go ahead, get on Douban, Dodo, Sogu, Zhenzhen, Baidu, Meituan, QQ, UC, Youku, WeChat, Sina, Weibo, etc., and call Xi a criminal or promote Western-style elections. The party knows that all this social media is a powerful pressure release valve for its 1.4 billion citizens to express themselves. It's not street public, so there is no loss of Confucian face. Being the world's largest surveyor and pollster, all this affords Baba Beijing a myriad pulse on the body politic, as well as all the trends in what the masses are thinking. Given China's mastery of artificial intelligence and big numbers, the party can parse all these opinions and trends by socioeconomic group, geographical location, education, profession, and on to better respond to the people's democratic aspirations. William, the fact of the matter is that people outside China are brainwashed by 150 years of rabid anti-communism socialism, especially after Russia's mighty anti-imperial 1917 revolution. As well, they are just as brainwashed with deep-seated anti-Chinese racism going back centuries, which I wrote about and referenced in my previous article. But having been on the ground in China for a total of 15 years since 1990 and seeing its never before in human history evolution and transformation, while doing thousands of hours of research on pre- and post-liberation China, I can say in no uncertain terms that China has the most open, participatory, responsive, and citizen-satisfying democracy in the world. The fact that it is based on Marxism, Leninism, Mao thought, means it's radically different than the West version of electoral democracy. I think it's safe to say that the vast majority of Chinese's response is, "Thank goodness!" As far as Baba Beijing working with Rome to normalize relations and the appointment of bishops, like you, I'm no fan of the Imperial Vatican historically and currently. But there are millions of Chinese in underground churches, which I have witnessed firsthand, as well as gone to public churches. And because of the current Vatican-Beijing impasse, many of them are Catholic. The CPC will never forgive Western churches for their critical role in maintaining China's century of humiliation, 1839 to 1949. But she realizes that to bring transparency to China's religious groups and sects, Baba must normalize relations with the Pope. She is not doing this for the Vatican. He's doing it for his country's long-term social stability and harmony. Not to mention, the Holy See would have to renounce recognition of Taiwan as the Vatican's representative of China, which is long overdue. The Holy See is the lone holdout in Europe to continue to work with Taiwan, so the symbolism is ripe with significance. Uncle Sam realizes how important it is. Simply put, it has got to be done. I too closely followed Kim China's purchase of Syngenta last year, creating one of the biggest agricultural chemical and GMO repositories in the world. Kim China is a state-owned enterprise, ranks in Forbes Global 500, and is one of the biggest in its sector. It had $45 billion in revenue last year and turned a profit while swallowing up Syngenta, then the world number 2 agricultural company after Monsanto. You and I both distrust GMO, and based on our research, which you've done a mountain of, have serious concerns for humanity's long-term survival due to their use. Baba Beijing is responsible for feeding and clothing 1.4 billion citizens, almost 1/5 of the world's people. China has about 10% of the world's arable land. The announcement that China Tech has developed saltwater rice is wonderful news. As much as we disagree, Baba has come to the conclusion that these kinds of non-GMO advances will not be enough to realize China's goals for 2049, and that to not use GMO is a luxury it cannot afford. Russia is going all non-GMO, but it has even more arable land than China, with about 1/10 of the population. But we can enjoy the fact that Syngenta is now a China state-owned company whose CEO, Zhen Jianxin, is a fire-breathing member of the Communist Party of China. Take that, capitalist empire! You and I remind me of a story Godfrey Roberts told me. He saw a YouTube video with a professor recounting a funny story at a big Sino-American conference. A Chinese vice president was one of the guests, meaning he was one of the most powerful members of the CPC. A Western human rights type was there in this VP's face, ranting about the case of so-and-so and their loss of freedom, civil rights, due process. Being very Confucian, the VP respectfully let this person have their say till the very end. Then the VP replied, paraphrasing, "Thank you for sharing your views. You know, I must apologize profusely, but I don't know who you are talking about. Please understand that every day I get up and am responsible for the happiness, well-being, and harmonious stability of 1.4 billion people." Needless to say, the VP's reply was the end of that discussion. Thus, from Baba Beijing's perspective, as sincere and research-supported as they may be, Our concerns about GMO rank right down there with the West's contrived concerns for some Chinese citizens' supposed loss of human rights. The CPC has a big job on its hands, or, if you will pardon my egregious pun, Baba Beijing has much bigger GMO fish to fry. Always wonderful to hear from you, William. Best from Jeff in China. This is Jeff J. Brown, China Rising Radio Sinoland, signing out. Have a wonderful week.